All right, good evening. We are on Sunday nights looking at Proverbs. It's a little bit sporadic because we have other things that we do on Sunday nights as well. So it feels like we've been in Proverbs for a long time. But this is the fifth message. I don't know how many we're going to have. I don't know, 9, 8, 9, somewhere in there. But this is number 5, and we're going to talk about conflict tonight as we continue looking for wisdom, reliable guidance for things that we deal with in everyday life. And so we're going to talk about conflict tonight, dealing with differences. This is a topic that I address in pre-marriage counseling with any couple that I do. Doesn't matter what their particular strength areas or growth areas are. We always talk about conflict because every relationship, even the closest, most cherished relationships, have conflict. It is just a part of our everyday life. And so there are foolish ways and wise ways of dealing with conflict that we have in every relationship. And the book of Proverbs speaks to both of those. I've got this verse 16:7 is kind of a centerpiece for us today to kind of remind us of what we're pointing to. When a man's ways please the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. There is remarkable peace that's possible in relationships, not just in marriages or friendships or co-working relationships that have normal everyday conflict, but even where there are enemies, peace is possible. And so that's what our aim is in every relationship, in every situation of conflict, is we're working toward peace. What we're going to do tonight is look at habits first that lead to strife, and then habits that lead to peace, which is that's the direction that wisdom points us. But we're going to start here first with what not to do. The fool is a major character in Proverbs, and we are going to examine the way of the fool as he's always getting into fights, always getting into strife and stirring it up, and pick up on a few of the habits that we see in Proverbs that, let's just say we see in the mirror. I'm not pointing at anybody tonight. So somebody's going to say, you stepped on my nose or you got in my grill. I'm not looking at anybody tonight, okay? First habit is mouthing off. Proverbs 18:6 and 7, a fool's lips walk into a fight, and his mouth invites a beating. A fool's mouth is his ruin, and his lips are a snare to his soul. Let's reflect on it for a minute. Obviously it's talking about foolish speech. Lips and mouth are personified, but what's being talked about is speech. Foolish speech leads to disputes. When you're not wise with your words, you walk into a fight. How many times have we used the expression, you walked right into that? You know, what you said led into something you didn't really want to be in. Or we'll say you asked for it, you said it, so now it comes back on you. How often do our apologies go something like this? I shouldn't have said that. How often does that happen? Our foolish speech, thoughtless, reckless, walks us right into conflict. And we wish we could step out of that. So it's making us think here, especially the last part, about the consequences of speaking before you think. It's talking about the ruin of the foolish man. A fool's mouth is his ruin, and his lips are a snare to his soul. When it talks about soul there, it's getting us to think deeply. Not only do you just get into a spat, but it's having this deep, profound effect on you. In a way, this proverb is saying, get a handle on your lips before they ensnare your soul. Our speech has devastating consequences on others and on ourselves. I was just getting some exercise one day in the neighborhood and noticed a dispute on the front yard of somebody's house. I don't know who they were. I stayed out of it. It was a husband and wife. It was hard to stay out of it because the husband was yelling. He's using the power of his voice to make his point the most assertive. And what was really sad was seeing his teenage daughter sitting on the porch just crying. Had nothing to do with her, but she's broken over it. It makes us think about our speech. You know, you mouth off something, you do it recklessly or rashly without thinking about it, has profound, significant effect. Hold your tongue, keep your peace. Those are two common expressions that really mean the same thing. We use them the same way. Keep your peace means hold your tongue. But it's interesting because that's what the proverb is saying. Hold your tongue, keep your peace. You don't hold your tongue, you walk into a fight. You ask for a beating. It leads to your ruin. Hold your tongue, keep your peace. So, number 2, meddling. This is why I stayed out of it. Proverbs 26:17, whoever meddles in a quarrel not his own is like one who takes a passing dog by the ears. So interfering in someone else's quarrel. Doesn't concern you, it's not about you, but you just can't keep from saying something. Have y'all seen social media? Oh my goodness. And people feel like there's some argument going on, and they just have got to comment. You just got to say it. And so you'll have this long thread of comments, and everybody is voicing their opinion. And what's interesting is that you end up getting more worked up at the end when it didn't even concern you to begin with. Now you're in the fight, and your blood pressure's up, and you're all mad about it and upset. Or somebody's saying something to you, and it hurts you, and it tears you down, and you weren't even in it to begin with. It's a picture of a busybody who just can't stay out of somebody else's business. I've got to get my word in there. I've got to say my part. And this proverb is saying it doesn't end well. I mean, you think about a stray dog. Remember, this is a Jewish world. Dogs were they were not pets. Dogs are unclean. You're talking about a stray dog. You grab a stray dog's ears, and you're going to find out. 37 stitches later. Saying it doesn't end well. This is not wise. It's a foolish thing to meddle in somebody else's quarrel. I like looking at idioms and these just common expressions, and it's funny how we get things mixed up sometimes. It's kind of interesting. I'll put up a multiple choice question for you here. Which is the correct form of the expression? Is it A, speaking your peace, or B, speaking your peace? Anybody want to go for it? What do you think? A. B and A. Well, see, one of you is right, okay? So the common expression is say your piece. It's about speaking your piece, P-I-E-C-E. It's say your part. Sometimes we just can't keep from speaking our piece. I just got to say it. I just got to get my part in there. I got to get my 2 cents in. And somehow we think that's going to make a difference. Somehow that's going to settle it. It doesn't. And adding your piece, adding your part to some dispute that doesn't concern you will only destroy your peace. You were just fine until you got into it, and now you got this dog on you. You're in a fight you didn't even need to be into it. So don't meddle. Number 3, gossip and slander. Proverbs 16, 27, and 28. I've got the New King James Version here. An ungodly man digs up evil, and it is on his lips like a burning fire. A perverse man sows strife, and a whisperer separates the best of friends. The ungodly man, one translator called this just the scoundrel. We're just talking about somebody that's up to no good. A scoundrel digs up evil and then spreads it like fire with his words. Digs up evil. The ESV has plots. Literally, it's digs. And it could be digging a pit for somebody, so plotting. I'm going to plot a trap. But it's also like what we would say with digging up dirt. Dig up dirt on a person. A scoundrel digs up dirt on somebody. It's finding that thing that's a negative about them. And then you spread it like a fire on the lips. And the word for that is slander. It's a false or damaging statement about someone. That's a really important definition. False or damaging statement about someone. Slander is when you say something about somebody that's not true that causes them harm, or something that's true that causes them harm. Sometimes we justify it. If it's true, well, I can say it. No, it may not be loving. It may not do good. It may actually do harm to say it. Even if it's true, will saying it do good? That's the question we have to ask. But the crooked person, the scoundrel, the perverse man, spreads strife, sows it like seed. And a whisperer separates the best of friends. A whisperer, the word for that, it's a fault-finding grumbler. In other words, a gossip. Some translators even use that word. A gossiper separates the closest of friends, best friends. What I do with my words, the way I speak about other people, causes conflict in relationships that were very close. It stirs up strife because there was this juicy morsel that I just couldn't keep from sharing. I knew this dirty deed that somebody did, and I've just got to tell somebody. And what it does, it causes so much harm to that person and often destroys relationships that matter so much. Relationships are so important. And we do damage to other people's relationships by the way that we speak about one another. I thought this was really insightful in this verse. Ray Ortland commented and said, adultery is perceived in most Bible-believing churches as a serious sin, and it is. But I've never seen adultery send a whole church into meltdown. Gossip, by contrast, is often perceived as a little sin, but it destroys churches. You know, we tend to think in terms of big sins and little sins. I would put adultery in a big sin category, and I'm afraid that sometimes I think gossip is in the little sin category. There's not big and little sin categories, and those little sins, quotes, little sins, often have enormous, devastating consequences. Number 4, habit that leads to strife, fussing and nagging. I like the word fussing. That's what my parents used to call it when we would argue, but it kind of gets the idea of kind of arguing over petty things, quarrels that don't really make a big difference. Proverbs 21:9. This is where I'm liable to get in trouble. It's better to live in a corner of the housetop than in a house shared with a quarrelsome wife. That's verse 9. And then in verse 19, better to live in a desert than with a quarrelsome and nagging wife. So, I mean, this is clearly, we're not talking about females, okay? This speaks to all of us, okay? But when you think about husband and wife in a house, you're talking about those close relationships. And these are the kinds of things that often disrupt household relationships. The people that we live with, that we spend the most time with, these kinds of things disrupt those relationships. This proverb is saying it's better to live anywhere than with a person who has such habits. The corner of a housetop is better. I think that's the Jewish equivalent to being in the doghouse, because they didn't have dog houses. It's better to be there than with a person who's like this. Better to be in a desert. And really, That's how it feels a lot of times. When you've got fussing and nagging, this constant nagging in the house, you've got two people who live together, but they might as well be living one in a house and one in a desert because they're miles apart. There's so much distance between them because we decide it's better to be distant than to be close to somebody like this. Fussing and quarrelsome. The words that I call fussing, that's quarrelsome in this text. It's a word that's associated with judging. It's that mentality that's always, I'm right, you're wrong. The quarreler is somebody who's always looking at how you do things, and you're wrong and I'm right, and I'm going to tell you about it. That's the quarreler. So it's closely associated to nagging. The ESV has fretful, which is technically correct, but nagging really, I think in our language, the way we use it, captures it better. It's this persistent fault-finding and complaining. So the person who's fussing and nagging is always evaluating how another is doing, concluding that you're wrong, I'm right, and I'm going to persistently find fault and let you know about your faults. Fussing and nagging at every little thing is itself a very big thing, is what it's telling you. We might think, little sin, not a big deal. Yeah, it's huge. It's destroying a relationship that matters a great deal to God. Number 5, habit that leads to strife, venting. Proverbs 29:22. A man of wrath stirs up strife, and one given to anger causes much transgression. A man of wrath, one given to anger. It's an angry person. One given to anger, literally, I like this. It's a master of wrath. Do you know anybody like that? Somebody who's a master of wrath, like they've got that down. One commentator said, a person who's a master of wrath is actually mastered by it. They're mastered by their rage. You look at someone and go, they're always angry. They're always outraged. There's a way about them that's just constantly on edge. They're actually mastered by their anger. And anger, it doesn't lead anywhere good. Here, it stirs up strife, causes much transgression. It doesn't lead anywhere good. James said as much, the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. James 1:20. It's one of those things that we justify sometimes. We think of it as a righteous anger. I think we ought to be much more careful about labeling something as righteous anger and recognize that much of what we feel as anger and want to voice as anger is not leading to the righteousness of God. Causes transgression, it stirs up strife. Angry outbursts promote conflict. They escalate conflict. They cause it to increase when we burst out. We call it venting. It's kind of funny how we justify things. Venting is one of those things that I'm just venting. I just got to let it out a little bit. That's the definition for venting is giving free expression to anger. I just got to let it out. It's actually a lack of self-control. We're not supposed to vent it. We're supposed to master it. Just to think about this anger that I'm feeling, I've got to get that under control. I don't want it to master me and then I'm a master of wrath. Need to control it. Got a long quote here by Buster Benson from his book called Why Are We Yelling?, which is a great title. It says, every relationship is like a garden, and every garden has weeds. Arguments are the little weeds of our relationship that grow up around the things we intentionally plant. Some arguments don't seem so bad. It might be easy to work around whenever they pop up. Others might be ugly enough that you go nuclear on them, and that patch of the yard's abandoned as scorched earth for a couple of years. I like his way of putting things. Going nuclear on things that make you angry is the habit of the fool. It's out of control rage. It's unrestrained anger. I see that thing that's not right, and I go nuclear on it. That is the way of the fool. But the other thing I like about this is just the illustration of every relationship as a garden, and every garden having weeds. Every relationship has conflict in it. It's going to be there. And you want to think about, well, what are we growing in this relationship? Where are we moving? It's supposed to be moving towards peace. Toward peace. So let's think about the habits that lead to peace. Our centering text, Proverbs 16:7, when a man's ways please the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. That's where we're going, okay? So here are some habits of wise people that lead to peace. Number one, listen carefully. Proverbs 18:2. A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. If one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. The way of a fool is not interested in hearing or learning or understanding where somebody else is coming from, only in expressing their opinion. And we do it so quickly, don't we? Even before he hears, the text says. Even before I really grasp it, I'm already expressing my opinion. That's the way of the fool. The implication is, now you look at that and you say, well, it's not telling us what a wise person does. It is, by implication, it's saying, listen. The fool doesn't. The fool is not interested in hearing what somebody else has to say. They just want to voice their opinion, giving an answer quickly, saying what I want to say. It's folly and shame. But a wise person listens more and speaks less. The old saying is about, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You listen more. That's a good way to remember. We got to work really hard at listening. We ought to listen really well and let speech come slowly. James 1:19 and 20, which I've already quoted, ties together listening with anger. Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. It seems to me like we get that twisted all the way around so often. We're quick to anger, quick to speak, slow to hear. We just got it in reverse. Be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. Listening well. This is something that I share in pre-marriage counseling. It's not original to me. It's pretty common to hear this, but it's very helpful. If you want to be a good listener, I asked somebody one time, "What's active listening?" They said, "Well, that's when you shake your head when someone's talking." That's not active listening. Okay. Active listening is making sure you understand what somebody says. You might initially think you understand, and you're ready to tell them what you think, but you need to humbly recognize you probably don't understand. So try and make sure you're really grasping it before you give any negative feedback. So just a formula statement there is, so if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is, and then you put what they said in your own words. If I understand right, is this what you mean? It gives them the opportunity to say, well, no, not exactly. Or, yeah, kind of, but more like this. You'll get somewhere if you'll try to grasp it. You try to understand. Rather than just saying, I'm going to tell you what I think, listen really well. If I hear you correctly, what you're saying is. A second thing that is really helpful is find something you agree with before you express a point of disagreement. You have to listen really well to do that, especially if you're in conflict and in an argument. Because what we latch onto is the thing that I don't like. I disagree with that and I want to correct that. And you might need to give some feedback. But you want to listen first because there's probably some truth in what the person is saying. Listen to it. Recognize, say, yeah, I see where you're coming from on that. Here was my intent, or here's another way of thinking about it. But you want to listen well. And in a way that honors the other person. Those are just some things that I found helpful. A second habit that leads to peace is to answer gently. Proverbs 15, verse 1. I've got it here in the NIV. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. contrasting gentle with harsh and their relation to conflict, wrath, anger, those heated situations. Harsh, that's a painful word, a word that hurts. The same word is used in Genesis 3 when it talks about the pain of childbirth. That's the harsh word. And a harsh word, it could be the content of it. It could be what the word was, a word of contempt, a word that was meant to hurt. That can be a harsh word. But it can also be the tone. And I think that's really what the proverb is emphasizing, is the tone. A harsh way of speaking, a loud way of speaking, yelling, which is meant to overpower, actually turns the heat up. It stirs up anger. It escalates conflict. When people fight, what do? Typically, their voices get louder. And all it does is escalate the situation. Yelling always makes it worse. But a gentle answer, a soft answer, that doesn't mean you hold back truth. Truth doesn't always feel pleasant. Truth needs to be said. But you think about tone and volume. In a situation of conflict, tone and volume, a gentle tone, a soft volume can diffuse a heated exchange. You might just think about who has been that example in your life. Twice in one day, I talk about my dad. He helped share the gospel with me, but one of the things that I admired about my dad was that he never yelled in anger. He yelled if we were about to die, we're doing something dumb. He'd yell to get our attention, but he never yelled in anger. And I've watched him when he's in discussions with somebody that he disagrees with. And my dad has this really special habit of turning the volume down when he's in a conversation where there's a disagreement. Even if the other person gets louder, he gets quieter. He doesn't back down. He doesn't just give in. There may need to be some things that need to be said, but he always turns the volume down. A gentle answer turns away wrath. There's common saying, but there's truth in it. Meekness is not weakness. I think sometimes we're afraid to be gentle. We're afraid to be meek because it doesn't assert strength. If this point is right, then I need to make it with strength and with power and with a louder voice. Meekness is this gentleness under control. It's this strength under control. It's gentle. You want to be that way with your speech. You can say truthful words that have power in them, but you say them gently, and that can actually get you somewhere in a situation of conflict. Number 3, avoid unnecessary conflict. Proverbs 17:14. I chose the CSB, Christian Standard Bible, for this one because of the way they translate it. To start a conflict is to release a flood. Stop the dispute before it breaks out. Now, obviously, some conflict is necessary. Some conflict is healthy. That's why I say avoid unnecessary conflict. There are some situations you need to speak up, and there's going to be a disagreement, and you need to work through it. That's not what this proverb is about. This proverb is saying that arguments tend to get out of hand. And you think you're going to just make some offhanded comment to correct a person, to critique a person, and what you've got now is like water that breaches a dam. Suddenly this little trickle, you let this little bit out, and then it's like the dam burst, and you've got this out-of-control argument. And so a foolish person proceeds without caution. I just go right in, and then we end up in this World War III argument over some petty thing that shouldn't have even been brought up. But a wise person prevents the flood. A wise person says, before this turns into World War III, let me consider, is this the hill that I want to die on? Is this a petty thing? Or is this something really important that I need to bring up? How important is this? A wise person will rise above petty and pointless disputes. We'll stop it before it ever breaks out because you know what? That is not a fight worth having. Maybe I would do better to learn to forgive or to endure or to love instead of raising this issue. A wise person will rise above what's petty. Now let's say that it's not petty and you need to bring it up. Yeah, this needs to be necessary conflict. A wise person will consider before they speak, how is this likely to go over? What's the response likely to be? And what can I do or not do to keep it from going terribly? You want to be wise in the way you approach it. Don't just rush into it, but think about it. Again, most of this is think before you speak. I love this quote, Kevin Lehman. He says, if God wanted us to know what the other person was thinking, he would have given us glass foreheads. I love that. God made it so that not everything I think you see. And he's called me to consider wisely rather than just, we value transparency, especially in close relationships. Transparency is important, but transparency does not mean saying everything you think. God gave you the ability and the responsibility to think through what needs to be said and how is this going to come across. You should not say everything you think. Number 4, seek resolution. Proverbs 23, again, Christian Standard Bible. Honor belongs to the person who ends a dispute, but any fool can get himself into a quarrel. Okay, the essence of this is saying, and I'm not trying to use this word flippantly, it's really what this is getting at. Any idiot can get into an argument. Anybody can do that. It doesn't take a wise person to get into an argument. Anybody can do that. But a person of honor can end one. A wise person can end a quarrel. Now, I picked the CSB here because I think the ESV says keep aloof. And the reason why is because there's a range of meanings that this word can mean. It can mean anything from avoiding to preventing to ending. And we've kind of looked at all of that sometimes wisdom says, this is not a fight I need to have. I need to avoid this unnecessary conflict. Sometimes wisdom says, I'm going to prevent this from being really bad. I want to think about a wise way to approach it. But another aspect of wisdom, of an honorable approach, is I can bring this to a resolution, working toward resolution. And Jesus taught us how important it was to seek reconciliation, to move into the direction of ending a difference, a dispute, a spat between that we have with somebody and bringing us to a place of peace, of ending it. It takes wisdom to do this. One of the things that has helped me with this is to think about it this way. The issue is not who is right, but how can we resolve this disagreement? Oh man, so much of our fighting is about, I want to prove my point. I'm right, I want you to know it, and I'm going to argue until you see it. But what if our goal was, how can we resolve this disagreement? What's the way that we're going to bring this to a good resolution? That's the direction. On this proverb, Bruce Walke, just a profound Old Testament scholar, I love the way he comments on this proverb. Paradoxically, the way to honor is to abstain from defending one's honor. Isn't that interesting? Sometimes you think, but I'm right. I want to defend my point. But the honorable thing is sometimes not to do that. The wise are more concerned to bring peace than to be right. But the fool cannot restrain himself. The fool just has to speak. The wise, more concerned to bring peace than to be right. Number 5, be willing to yield. Proverbs 18 through 19. I've always wrestled with this. I've not understood it. And it actually became the proverb that hit me the hardest in my study this week. The lot, which is sort of like rolling the dice, the lot puts an end to quarrels and decides between powerful contenders. A brother offended is more unyielding than a strong city, and quarreling is like the bars of a castle. So what we have described here are two people locked in conflict. It's like a castle. It's like a strong city. They're both unyielding. And it calls special attention to the brother offended, one who feels cheated, who feels wronged. They're unyielding like a strong city. You've wronged me, and I'm going to defend my honor to the death if I need to. And this proverb, these are tied together. These two verses are tied together. The lot ends it. The lot decides between them. So you've got two people locked in a battle. They're unyielding, and you cast lots, and the decision is made, and that ends it. So now here's where I've struggled with that. What is that saying? Should we roll the dice every time we get in an argument? You know, you and your wife have a disagreement. Well, let's just roll the dice, and we'll see which one. That's not the point. The point, and that's actually not a wise way to do things. I would not recommend rolling the dice to settle disagreements. The point is that somebody has to yield. At some point, two people locked in a battle, unyielding, somebody has to yield. And you know what? You may not get what you want. You may not get what is due you. You might have to give to the other what you feel certain they don't deserve. That's not easy, is it? If you want to seek peace, if you want to resolve disagreements, you've got to be willing to yield. And I'll just remind you in closing that we follow a Savior who prayed, "Yet not my will, but yours be done." We follow a Savior who said, I don't want to drink this cup, but I want to yield to the will of my Father. And as a result of doing the will of his Father, he carried the cross that we deserved. He took what was due us. He didn't deserve that. He yielded to it for our sake. That is love. And that's the love that we are called to. It's the only way that we're going to have peaceable relationships is to follow the way of our Savior, Jesus. If there's anything we can do for you tonight, help you with any way, pray with you. If you want to put Christ on in baptism, I invite you to the front now while we stand and sing.